So when you see Siu Nim Tao being done, you'll see some people who are, when they're punching, it comes out slowly because they're thinking about structure. And you have other people that are shooting out there with power because they're focusing more on that power of putting that energy out there. Okay. And the same thing with the Tan Sao. You'll see some people that will keep it bent and only out so far. You know, other people, you know, their Tan Sao's out here, more flat, or they might be extending it up more. Okay. And again, the Fook Sao idea, you know, some people do it really low, you know, and then it comes back up. And you know, when I was first taught, it was like a circle. This came up, the Wu Sao kind of rose, and he came down, and then this was about medium level, the Fook Sao. And you know, what I found with that Fook Sao is you have this application that is not just this sticking with the Fook Sao, but it's kind of this turning and this dropping of the Fook Sao, because the Fook Sao hand, the hook, actually, when it's locked in place, is kind of like a heavy weight on the end of that arm. And so there's a way to hit the inside of an elbow of an opponent with that Fook Sao, and you drop it and you knock it down. So you drop it and you knock it down and you move in to attack the center line. And so then that's where I'm seeing that, you know, when it comes down and it's low, that's what you're doing. Whatever the opponent's arms are doing, your Fook Sao is actually coming down and it's grounding that. And it's almost like a heavy anchor that you put on somebody's deck. You know, if we're a boat in Wing Chun with our triangle and our wedge shape, well, that heavy Fook Sao is like throwing an anchor on a person's deck, and it kind of pulls them down, pulls their arms down. And so there's that use of the Fook Sao when it's sideways versus, you know, a Fook Sao that's just kind of forward, that's just engaging and controlling and hooking, you know, a forward Fook Sao. But the sideways Fook Sao has that heavy feeling to it that can pull people down, can suck them down, and it almost sucks them down as much as a Lop Sao can, or a Gum Sao, you know, jamming hand. So there's this kind of pulling down energy that you don't see too often. When we see people doing double sticky and then they move into freestyle and they're doing Gorsh Sao, you don't see that where they're sucking people in on the lop, and they might even be, you know, pivoting, but they're really pulling and they're jerking that person forward so then they can come right back into their center line. You know, so it's just as powerful as like that double jut Sao where you're pulling somebody in, but it can be done with a lop, or it can be done with that Fook Sao, right? So that's this Fook Sao that's low, but you see, I also see a Fook Sao that comes high, like an uppercut, that goes right to the opponent's throat. So that Fook Sao, when it comes back from that Wu Sao, can shoot forward into the opponent's throat. And yet it still has enough of an angle to protect your center line when it comes forward. And so you have all sorts of people doing Wing Chun where they're throwing strikes up there and out there, but they're leaving this open to get hit because they're not keeping the elbows bent and in. Like our Fook Sao, like our Tan Sao, like even our punch, that elbow is in and it's protecting the center line. And if we straighten it too much, it doesn't protect the center line. Okay, so again, just some differences, and you know, between the lineages and what they do. And there are reasons for, you know, when you might want to extend further. Okay, but for the most part, if you follow the Wing Chun principles, then the application will work better. And it's surprising how well it works versus just trying to go faster, you know, harder, extending more, right? Because again, if you're bent, somebody grabs that and they pull that or they lop it, then you're able to transition into something else, right? You know, they pull you forward to the side to hit you. You know, you can come forward and drop a bong into them and protect yourself, right? But only if your arms are bent. If you're extended, you know, then you don't have that. And kind of like the Shaolin thing too, you keep it slightly bent on the punch, slightly bent. Because if you extend all the way, then like Aikido, you know, they'll kind of intercept that and they'll keep that extension and they'll pull you and throw you, right? So if somebody does the punch and they're extending all the way, then we do the Busao into a lop and we'll pull that extension. The Busao to intercept and we'll pull that. So if they're doing these punches that are way out here, that's kind of their weakness. But of course it's always the tall dudes with the long arms like Eamon. Big old long arm Eamon, right? He uses that to his advantage. But then you see he never shows his students what to counter that with, right? Okay, well thank you again for your time.